Welcome back to Old School Sports and your Out of the Park Baseball 25 series. Can we save the Oakland A's? And our Oakland A's are the defending 2040 World Series champions as we start approaching the 2041 season. Just completed an acquisition of two very highly regarded players in the International Amateur Free Agency pool this year. Haven't done really much of anything at the major league level as far as the free agent market this year. In fact, we've generally been losing free agents off of our team, most notably Chase Dora, the excellent pitcher who was on our team for the last 4.5 seasons and won 3 world championships in those 5 postseasons he played with us here in Oakland. So we're probably not going to be looking to do too much over this episode. I think the most interesting thing we're going to find out is what happens with the franchise, Jake Ortega, our other big free agent that we're most likely unable to bring back this offseason. I guess if his price got a lot cheaper, there still is a chance. Speaking of chances, Chris Patterson, a very good pitcher who we've been following since he was a draft pick, number 1 overall out of Washington in 2031, and Camden Reisinger, pitcher who was with us a few years ago, are both on the trade block. Don't really see us doing anything to bring on either of those players, but always interesting to see people who we've followed over the years. And speaking of guys that we've followed over the years, Jake Ortega, the franchise, spent his entire major league career, parts of 10 seasons at this point, with us in Oakland, won 3 world championships, a Rookie of the Year, and a couple of MVP awards. Is headed to free agency for the first time in his career. The 33-year-old who's wrecked physically is easily, at this point, the most talented player left on the market. Not even close. The only competition is the starting pitcher, Kevin Mooney, who is above average starter in terms of his ratings, coming off of a really nice 17-4 season for the Phillies. But at 29 years old, has been a bit above a league average pitcher over the course of his career. Ortega, of course, is a borderline Hall of Fame candidate if he can kind of continue doing what he's doing over the first 10 years in the majors, over another 5, 6, 7 years. But given his age and given his health, that is the big question. That being said, I will say this about the franchise. He is not letting the fact that no one has signed him dissuade him. His requests keep going up. He's now looking for 4 years at $42.4 million a season. Claims to have an offer from New York. Perhaps he's lying. Perhaps he'll end up with the Yankees or the Mets. We'll find out, hopefully, I would think, over the course of this episode. Was kind of hoping if Ortega lingered on the market until February or March, which is still possible, that his demands might come down to an amount where we could look to potentially reunite with him for at least 1 more year. But with the demands that he is making right now, that still seems quite unlikely. We have made a number of minor league contract offers to try to round out the upper levels of our minor league organization. We've got about a month until spring training begins, just a little under a month at this point. So probably going to be a relatively short episode here, but will be very eventful if we eventually find out where Mr. Ortega will be playing in 2041. And as it turns out, the franchise was not bluffing. He has signed. We have received another supplemental first-round pick, similar to the one that we got for Chase Dora, for the signing of Jake Ortega with the New York Yankees. Ended up 4 years at $36.5 million a year with a vesting option for that 4th season. So Mr. Ortega lingered on the market until late January, but ended up getting paid very well for a player in his situation by the Yankees. Certainly someone that we could be potentially seeing in the postseason this year. Did take another 3 points of hit to fan interest, dropping us down to a 96, but given how important Mr. Ortega has been to our franchise, I can't really complain too much about a 3-point hit to fan interest. We kind of knew this was coming, and it sounds like the fans were largely expecting it too. So although they are not thrilled, they are not shocked by the developments. Probably will need to add a little more money into the draft budget, though, with that additional supplemental pick. And since we won't be chasing after Mr. Ortega, we've got money to put aside at this point. We will be finishing up the development lab before we finish this episode. You can see our farm system now ranks second overall. The trade that we made earlier this offseason to bring in Luis Villarreal certainly helps us as he's looked at as the number 38 prospect in baseball at this point. So farm system still in a very nice spot. But we'll take a look at what we're doing with some of our more mature players largely. And in the development lab, things are going okay. Unfortunately, Jonah Richards is frustrated with his efforts to generate more bat speed and hit more home runs. Two disappointing, very disappointing potential results for some important pitchers, with both Chuck Huntley and Mike Blumenshine struggling with their programs. Hopefully the news there will be better over the next 4 to 5 weeks. Dave Baumler frustrated with his work on improving his pitch arsenal. Mendick struggling, Delgado frustrated, and Heilman unfortunately frustrated with their secondary improvement programs. And then we've also got some younger players working on offensive tasks that are also having some problems. David Palomares and Jesus Aguiar both have some potential for actual regression with the work they're doing in their contact programs. Bobby Armstrong, the acquisition early in this offseason, frustrated as he's trying to generate more home run power. And Dozer Camunez also frustrated with his work on improving his pitch arsenal. So at this ratio of successful to unsuccessful programs, it looks like it could be one of the less fruitful off seasons in the development lab for this Oakland A's organization. Hopefully things will improve a bit over the next 4 to 5 weeks. Always hate to have any of those red-colored, struggling results where players can actually regress. And unfortunately, at this point, 5 out of the 20 programs could be headed in that direction. So that's something we'll be checking in on more closely as we finally get to the end of the development lab when we get to the start of spring training. And we've simmed ahead to the start of spring training, so a day away from finding out what's going to happen in the development lab. You can see we've got a mix between excelling and frustrated players on the first page. Chuck Huntley, the closer, unfortunately still struggling with improving his pitch arsenal. And Heilman struggling with secondary pitch improvement. Aguiar and Palomares, a couple of very important potential players for our future, both still struggling with their quality of contact programs. So 4 of the 20 programs that we have going could end up with potentially negative results when we move forward to tomorrow after we play our opening day of spring training against the Blue Jays. Hopefully it won't end up being that bad when all is said and done. And we won on opening day of spring training, 2-1 against the Blue Jays. So that was a good start to the spring for our Oakland Athletics. Unfortunately, the results in the development lab, not good at all. Still waiting one more day to find out what happened with Mike Armstrong. So we'll sim forward tomorrow. in our next episode and find out what happened with him. He, of course, started a day later than everyone else because we picked him up in a trade a day after the offseason had started. But of the 19 programs that were completed, only 7 were successful, 12 were unsuccessful, and 4 poor results, which we will get into and find out more about here. Luis Aguayo, the excellent young left-handed pitcher, unfortunately unsuccessful improving his pitch movement. This one's disappointing. Jesus Aguilar, the young left-handed hitting outfielder who we think could potentially be in the mix to be our center fielder this year, or at least in a platoon at center field, was working on his quality of contact, and unfortunately both his power and his eye dipped a bit, and those were 2 areas that were a bit weak for him to begin, so that probably doesn't improve Monster's chances of making the team. No improvement for Ernesto Comunez with his arsenal. David Palomares, another really bad result, poor result for the young infielder. Both his power and his eye dipped a bit as he was trying to improve his contact. 21-year-old still has a profile that suggests he could be a good major leaguer, but doesn't really look like he's going to be a great one, unfortunately. Another poor result for Joe Heilman. Arm proneness to injury increases from normal, bordering on durable, to just normal. So his injury likelihood increases with an arm injury, which is, of course, problematic when you're a pitcher. And he also didn't improve his secondary pitch. We're hoping he would improve that splitter. He had a lot of opportunity to do that, according to our scouts, and unfortunately it went poorly. Finally, some decent results. Doug Weiss, successful with secondary pitch improvement, better slider going forward. That's a nice move forward for a guy coming off of an excellent year when he led the American League with 21 wins. Nelson Delgado, secondary pitch improvement, works on his curve. He's a guy who's going to be fighting for a roster spot in our bullpen this year. No improvement for Jake Mendick, unfortunately. Trey Saldana with an outstanding result from his secondary pitch improvement. His splitter improves for us. Justin Scherer with some improvement of his slider. Dave Baumler, unfortunately no improvement. And Mike Blumenshine, unfortunately no improvement for him as well. Chuck Huntley, as we had been talking about, a poor result from his pitch arsenal program, and his movement on his pitches declined a bit. That's not good. He's been a pretty darn good reliever for us. He's been our closer for the last 3 seasons, averaging 34 saves a year for us over that time, 2+ WAR a season. So certainly not great to see your closers' ratings moving in the wrong direction. Jeff Shans, no improvement. No improvement for Chisin Iwata on his contact program, and no improvement for Wilson Rangel on improving his pitch movement. But we'll save at least 3 outstanding results to talk about at the end, and these could be pretty important to us. Chad Evans, endurance training program, outstanding result. His stamina improved by 5. Only moves him up to a 35, but this is a guy who has a very impressive 4-pitch arsenal. We think he can be an excellent right-handed reliever for us, and that addition to stamina with that 4-pitch arsenal at least makes him a borderline guy to think about starting for us. Also potentially makes him a higher volume possibility out of the bullpen. Don't love that he's fragile as far as his injury proneness, but you could see a scenario where he could have a more prominent role. And then a couple of outstanding results in generating bat speed, which hopefully will help boost the home runs from this offense. Luis Godina, a monster result for him. Had a really nice rookie year for us a year ago, and his potential and his current power both improved by 10. So Godina, the 24-year-old right-handed hitting first baseman, only 12 homers and 412 at-bats for us as a rookie, certainly looks poised to hit a lot more this year. Unfortunately, he'll be fighting for playing time at first base with the guy who also had an outstanding result, and that's Jonah Richards, one of the top prospects in baseball. His potential power only improved by 5, but his current power rating increased by a ridiculous 15. So Jonah Richards looks even better than before. Number 4 prospect in baseball, hit 345 and 55 at-bats for us in the majors with 4 homers. Also was productive at times in the postseason. And the 24-year-old who we do envision taking over as our everyday catcher a year from now when we likely move on from Mr. Mendoza. Looks like he can potentially be an even bigger offensive force this year. I'm sure he's still looking for crazy money. 11 years and only $16 million a year, $186 million. I guess it's closer to 17 that he's actually looking for in terms of the average. That would take him up to his mid-30s. The average amount per year is not crippling, especially given that profile. Might be something for us to think about because the bat is a special bat at any position. And when you combine a bat like that with a guy that we think can be a well above average defensive catcher when all is said and done, young Mr. Richards looks like a very interesting player, especially after that outstanding result for him in the development lab this offseason. So we definitely have a lot to think about between now and the next episode. Obviously, we'll be getting into the development lab. Mentioned Bobby Armstrong, one day away from finding out how he does with that Generate Bat Speed program. Seems pretty unlikely that he'll end up with as productive a result as we got from Richards and Godina. But at the very least, hopefully Armstrong won't regress, and we'll spend some time kind of figuring out the rest of the programs, hopefully do some defensive work with some other players around our organization, keep this team healthy, maybe make a few acquisitions on the margins, although there's not really much available on the market at this point. We could certainly reunite with one of our former catchers. Dave Ackley and Jaden Boakai were our duo at catcher for a few years, not all that long ago, and at this point they are both free agents willing to sign minor league contracts, along with Jackson Chorio, Byron Dervish, some familiar names that we have talked about over the years. Samuel Basayo also out there. Pitching-wise, Jackson Jobe still playing in the majors here in 2041. But not a lot of real impact pitchers left on the market, but may end up signing a player or two to a minor league contract, but did not expect this was going to be a big free agent offseason for us, and we actually haven't signed a single player to a major league free agent contract this year. Knew it was going to be a year with some departures. Dora and Ortega are both officially gone. But as we've talked about in previous episodes, even though we've certainly lost some talent this offseason, I think we've got a lot of good youth in this organization. It'll be good to give some young players an opportunity, both on the pitching staff and in the lineup this year, particularly in the outfield. And I think, if anything, we're going to struggle to find enough at-bats for some of these good young players. So who knows, we may do something interesting, manipulating some service time and stashing some important player or two in the minors for a little longer than they really deserve when we come out of spring training this year. But we'll find out the answers to that and probably some other questions in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.